Before the 1600s, mathematics was a still photograph. We could measure where a planet was, but not how it moved. Acceleration, continuous change, motion unfolding in real time, these were mathematical nightmares. Then calculus arrived, transforming our understanding of the world from a static image into a motion picture. With it, humanity could predict planetary orbit, design bridges that wouldn't collapse, and calculate the exact trajectory of a cannonball. It became the hidden engine behind modern science and engineering. But behind this revolutionary tool lies one of the strangest and most consequential disputes in intellectual history, a feud between Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. What began as a disagreement over discovery hardened into a clash of national pride. The result was a historical tragedy. British mathematics became isolated from Europe for nearly a century, from the early 1700s to the early 1800s. At the heart of the controversy lies a strange truth. Both men were right and both were desperately needed by the other. Newton and Leibniz discovered calculus independently. They arrived at the same mathematical continent from completely different starting points. Newton built the engine. He approached the problem with the physicist's eye. His method of fluxions emerged from thinking about motion, quantities flowing through time. He needed a tool to describe the moon's orbit, to turn gravity into mathematics. What he created was powerful, but it resembled a complex prototype. His notation, dots over variables, worked well for physical motion, but was difficult to generalize. It was expert-level machinery, not a system designed for widespread use. And crucially, Newton left the engine in the garage. Secretive and deeply averse to criticism, he kept this invention hidden for nearly 2 decades. Even in his 1687 masterpiece, Principia, which reshaped science itself, the calculus engine remains concealed beneath the elegant bodywork of classical geometry. Newton discovered the principle, but showed little interest in turning it into a tool the world could use. Leibniz designed the dashboard and handed out the keys. Leibniz was a philosopher and a language designer. He saw calculus not just as a calculating trick, but as a new grammar for understanding nature. When he independently reached the same principles, he made the opposite choice. He published. His true innovation was not just the mathematics, it was the interface, the symbols he introduced, the differential, dy over dx, manipulable like a fraction, the integral, visually evoking summation at a glance, made abstract ideas visible, flexible, and combinable. They turned calculus into something others could think with. In modern terms, Leibniz created an excellent developer experience. By publishing openly, he invited mathematicians across Europe to start this new machine and take it for a drive. His system was extensible, adaptable, and ready to be built upon. The analogy is simple. Newton invented the engine, powerful, original, and sealed inside a workshop. Leibniz independently designed an engine too, but also built the steering wheel, dashboard, and pedals, and wrote the manuals so everyone could learn to drive. They solved the same problem, but in isolation, and history gave them a rivalry instead of collaboration. At first, neither man seemed obsessed with priority. The real damage came from their followers. By the early 1700s, Newton's supporters began circulating accusations portraying Leibniz as an intellectual thief. What followed was not a scientific debate, but a capture of truth by power. In 1712, the Royal Society of London announced a fair and impartial inquiry. The reality bordered on parody. Most members of the committee were Newton's allies. The president of the society and of the committee was Isaac Newton himself. Historians later discovered that a large portion of the final report were written in Newton's own hand. He was not a neutral investigator, but prosecutor, judge, and jury. The verdict was inevitable. Newton was declared the true inventor, and Leibniz was left under a cloud of suspicion. The burden of proof was perversely reversed. Leibniz was expected to prove he had not seen Newton's unpublished work. He spent his final years defending himself and died in 1716, largely isolated, but the damage was already done. The dispute hardened into nationalism. British mathematicians treated Newton's notation like a national flag. To adopt Leibniz symbols was no longer a technical choice, it was seen as intellectual betrayal. On the European continent, the opposite happened. Mathematicians embraced Leibniz notation and began building at astonishing speed. The Bernoullis, Euler, Lagrange, and Laplace used this symbolic language to invent analysis, fluid dynamics, celestial mechanics, and entire new branches of mathematics. Leibniz notation didn't just record ideas, it generated them. Meanwhile, British mathematics entered the self-imposed exile. From the early 1700s until the early 1800s, for almost a full century, Britain remained largely cut off from the mathematical revolution unfolding across Europe. This was not a failure of intelligence or creativity, it was a failure of openness. British mathematicians inherited powerful ideas but were forbidden from using the language that made those ideas grow. During mathematics' golden age, Britain stood on the sidelines. Change finally came in the early 1800s. A group of young Cambridge reformers, the Analytical Society, including Charles Babbage and John Herschel, openly rebelled. Their slogan was sharp and deliberate, moving mathematics from the dot age to the deism. They imported continental textbooks, translated them, and demanded reform. By the 1820s, Britain finally rejoined the continental mathematical conversation nearly 100 years after it had walked away. Only then could later achievements flourish, but the cost of isolation was irreversible. Generations had been lost. The calculus Feud teaches a brutal lesson. Knowledge does not stagnate because it is wrong. It stagnates because it is fenced in. The deepest irony is that the excessive worship of Newton ultimately betrayed the Newtonian spirit itself. Openness was replaced with loyalty, inquiry with dogma. Today, we face challenges every bit as profound as calculus once was. Artificial intelligence, climate science, biotechnology. These are not problems a single genius or nation can solve alone. Progress does not depend solely on discovery. It depends on language, on usability, on openness. Truth is not perfected when it is found. It is perfected when it is shared. 300 years ago, a feud froze British science for nearly a century. The lesson is clear. When pride closes the door, progress waits outside, sometimes for 100 years. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.